الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام الأكملان على خير خلق الله أجمعين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وأرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه واجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول ويتبعون احسنه آمين وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
يا خش اليوتيوب شوف.
Last week we went over
خش اليوتيوب وشوف. أقول لك
an
خش
important
اليوتيوب
topic
وشوف.
to kind of
لا ما في.
introduce the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi
لا والله
wasallam.
راح
That was looking at the situation of the Arabs
طب أوش
in
خلينا
Arabia
نجيك.
prior to
طيب
the
طيب
coming sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so we looked at the kind of life that existed in Arabia. And that's why it was referred to as the days of Jahiliyyah, the pre-Islamic times, and how there was a need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send a messenger at this particular time in history. Now, what the writers of Seerah, they begin discussing the family background of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is what we want to do today. They usually start with the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and how he left Hajar, his wife, and her newborn son Ismail in the valley of Mecca. And so this is where we start on the journey of looking at the family background of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So tonight we have several different stories to cover, starting from then, coming all the way to before the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we're talking about several centuries, and in fact, millennia between the time of Ismail and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're talking about thousands of years. And so we start with the origins, and we start with the story of Ismail alayhi salam. And so Ibrahim alayhi salam, he takes his wife and their newborn son to Hijaz. And so Ibrahim alayhi salam was not from Arabia. He was not from Hijaz, but rather he was from Iraq. And so he had two wives. He had Sarah and he had Hajar. From Sarah, he had Ishaq alayhi salam, and from Hajar he had Ismail alayhi salam. So he takes them to present-day Mecca, and at that time it was a dead valley. There was nothing there. However, the location was always sacred. This particular place where the Kaaba was eventually rebuilt by Ibrahim and Ismail, it was a sacred land. It was a sacred place. Now there is a difference of opinion among the scholars as to who first built the Kaaba. And so some mention that it was Adam alayhi salam, while many mention that it was Ibrahim alayhi salam. Either way, the location was always a sacred location, a sacred thing that Allah created. And so Ibrahim alayhi salam left his wife and his son Ismail there, along with some water and a bag of dates. And then he started to walk away. And Hajar, she knew that Ibrahim alayhi salam was going to leave them there. She did not know that he would leave them. She did not expect that he would leave them in such a place in the middle of the desert. where they have nothing. And so she started to follow him. And she asked him, "Oh, Ibrahim, are you going to leave us in this place, in this valley, where there's no cultivation, and there is no one living here?" And so Ibrahim alayhi salam answered. She asked him again, and she didn't get an answer. She asked him a third time, and again, no answer. Then she said, she asked, is it Allah who told you to do this, O Ibrahim? And so Ibrahim alayhi salam said yes. So that was all she wanted. That answer was sufficient of an answer for her. And so when she heard that, she said, in that case, Allah will not abandon us. Allah will not neglect us. We are taken care of. And so it shows you her trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Her tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though all odds are against her and against her survival. In terms of material standards, no human being will survive in such a place, let alone a woman with a newborn child. And so Ibrahim alayhi salam left. But when he reached the outskirts, a place where she could not see anymore, he turned around and faced the direction of the Kaaba and ate that. And this dua Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the ayat we recited in this congregation. In Surah Ibrahim, he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, رَبَّنَا إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ مِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ عند بيتك المحرم ربنا ليقيموا الصلاة فاجعل أفئدة الناس تهوي إليهم وارزقهم تقول الله I have left myself in this barren valley that doesn't have any vegetation, no cultivation. So let them establish something. Look at how his main concern was worshiping Allah. His main concern was not, I'll provide for them food. He mentions that after. Or just when you're provide for them of fruits. He mentions first, and left it for them to establish them. And then he makes that dua, and then he leaves them. Now, Hajar makes use of the small amount of water and things that she has, but obviously it's not enough. And so soon, whatever she had ran out. And so she was breastfeeding her son Ismail, and eventually, without food, without drink, her milk was going to dry out. And that's exactly what happened. And so Ismail starts to cry with hunger. And so Hajar, she could not bear that anymore, see the child in pain. And so she went in search of food. And so she started to climb a nearby hill. This hill will later on be referred to and called Safa. Safa. And so she looks to her right, to the left when she gets to the top of the hill, seeing if she could see any food, if she could see any people. And so when she cannot see anything, she climbs down. And then when she reaches the middle of the valley, she starts to run. And then she makes it to the next hill, which will later on be called Marwa. And she climbs on top of Marwa, and here she looks around again looking for food or sign of people. And when she cannot see it, she comes down doing the same thing. until she reaches Kamil. And so she does this 7 times. She does this 7 times. On the seventh time, when she reaches the top of Rabie, all of a sudden she hears a sound. And she looks around her for the source of this sound. And to her amazement, she sees that the sound was basically water gushing forth from beneath the feet of her son Ismail. And so this is when Jibreel came in and dug the well of Zamzam. And so the water is now gushing forth from his feet. And Hajar came and, you know, she didn't want this. She didn't want this water to dry up or to go to waste. And so she thought that if she just leaves it, it'll, you know, it'll go away. And so she starts to make it into a pool. She starts to gather the sand around it, and she made it into a pool. And this is how it became a well. This is how Zamzam became a well. So it stayed in that place to become a well. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so he said, may Allah have mercy on the mother of Ismail. If she had left the water alone, if she did not do that, then it would have become a whole river. It would have become a whole river or spring in which the water flows on the surface of the earth. Now, what was Hajar feeling when she was running up and down these two roads? Now, for us, we all know the story, and we knew what was going to happen. She had no idea what was going to happen. She did put her trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the sign of the true believer. But even then, the true believer, even after putting their trust in Allah, they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to protect them. And so she must have been broken. She must have been crying because of the pain and suffering that she's seeing of her son in front of her eyes. And so this was her test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah had hidden for her something that would happen. And imagine, right beneath his 2 feet, right beneath his 2 feet, she would never have imagined that this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would take care of them. Not only that, but she would never have imagined that hundreds of years later, in fact, thousands of years later, people would be following the footsteps till the day of judgment. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that this is the reason why in the Umrah or in the Hajj you make seven running between or walking between these two mountains. So that and so the lesson we learned from this is we need to realize that, you know, in difficult situations, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing us to see who will we be attached to. Will we attach ourselves to Allah, or will we attach ourselves to others? Or will we lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And so it's a test for us. It's also a test of our patience. And so when going through difficult situations, let us remember the story of Hajar and how she put her trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala eventually provided her with something formed there. Now, we finally have water in this barren valley. And in the desert, water is a source of life. It attracts not only human beings, but animals. And so, soon enough, there were birds hovering above, above the well of sunset. And so, a tribe that had migrated from Yemen were nearby. This tribe was the tribe of Judah. Tribe of Judah. And they were familiar with the area of country. And they were familiar, they knew that there was nothing in this land. There is no water, there is no vegetation. And so when they saw the birds hovering above that area, they became curious what's going on. So they sent two men to go investigate. And so these two men, they went, they saw what was there, and so they came back with the news of this well and this woman with her child. So this tribe of Johom, they decided not to come and settle in this place because then we have source of water, which is important in the desert. So they came and they asked Raja, can we settle this place? And so she responded, and she said, if you want to stay, I have a condition. That is, that this water belongs to you. You can come, you can live here, but the water is out. And so she, being a lonely woman with no protection whatsoever, she's negotiating, even though she's in a position of weakness. But she negotiated with them and they agreed. So now Ismail alayhi salam, he grows up among his tribe, which is now settled in. And so this is the beginning of Mecca in terms of it being an inhabited city. And so Ismail alayhi salam grows up among this Arab tribe. And remember, Ismail and his brother are not Arabs. They are from Iraq. They speak a different language. But now Ismail alayhi salam growing up among them, he learns their customs, their heritage, and he learns their language. So this is where the lineage of Allah begins. Ismail alayhi salam grows up and he becomes a man and he eventually marries his tribe. Now we fast forward. And so Jurhum, this tribe, remained in Mecca for almost 2,000 years. And they were basically managing over the affairs of Mecca, while the descendants of Ismail alayhi salam were managing the religious aspects of Mecca. So they had, remember, they had Zamzam. They're taking care of, whoever comes to Mecca. They're taking care of all the religious things. But Jurhum and their descendants, they are managing in terms of being the rulers of Mecca. But now, after hundreds of years, 2,000 years, Jurhum, they become tyrannical and they become corrupt. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends another tribe to annihilate them. And so this other tribe, they are Khuzar. They come in and they invade Mecca and they get rid of Jurhum. But before Jurhum leave, they do two things. They dump the well of Zamzam, they cover it up, and they erase any trace of it, any sign of the well of Zamzam. And they steal the treasures of the Kaaba. So by now the Kaaba was built. It was built by Ismail ibn Ibrahim. And it used to be a place where they would keep treasures. So they steal this treasure. And then now Khuza'ah, they become the de facto leaders of Mecca, while the descendants of Ismail by that time had already increased in number, branched out, and spread all over Arabia. The descendants of Ismail. However, there is one branch of their descendants who remain in Mecca, and they eventually be referred to as the tribe of Quraysh. They eventually be referred to as the tribe of Quraysh. And so Quraysh is the tribe in Mecca from the descendants of Ismail, and you have this other tribe, the tribe of Khuza'ah, who is ruling over. Now, last week we mentioned an individual who was from this tribe. Who was that individual? We mentioned a very important figure who played a huge role in changing the religion of the Arabs. Because as we can see, Ismail preached the message of Tawheed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be worshipped alone. But how is it that they ended up worshipping idols? This was because of an individual by the name of Amr ibn Shaykh from this tribe of Khuza'ah. He was one of their leaders. And we mentioned this story last week, how he is the one who introduced idol worship. Now we fast forward several hundreds of years, and we come to an individual by the name of Qusay ibn Kilab. He is from Quraysh, one of the descendants of Ismail alayhi salam. Qusay ibn Kilab, he becomes the leader of Quraysh. And he manages to unify Quraysh against Khuza'ah, which they did, and they ended up taking control of Mecca. Complete control. So now all of the affairs of Mecca are under Quraysh. Having complete control. Governing the city, having control of not only the religious affairs, like taking care of the pilgrims, looking after the Kaaba, but also heading what was known as the network, which is basically like the assembly or like the parliament. Also being the flag bearer. And so complete control was now in the hands of Quraysh. It was done by this leader of Quraysh by the name of Qusay ibn Kilab. Now, when Qusay passes away, he passes on these roles to his children. So now, the different roles that he had, he passed them on to his children, and they were distributed. So, one of them had control of, or one of them was responsible for the Kaaba. One was responsible for finances, etc. One of his sons was responsible for taking care of the pilgrims, giving them food and drinking, etc. And so his name was originally Amr. Now, I want us to pay attention to these names because they are important, as we're going to see. So we have Qusay. He has a son who is originally known as Amr. Now, initially, they used to have a particular way of feeding pilgrims by giving them bread and drink and something. But Amr, he invented a new way of feeding them, and that was by taking the bread and crushing it and mixing it with soup. So now we have crushed bread mixed with soup. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because in the Arabic language, doing this, crushing bread, is known as hasham. Hasham. So Amr, because he innovated this new way of feeding the pilgrims, he ended up being known as Hashim. He ended up becoming known as Hashim. And he is who? Who is Hashim? Hashim is basically the great grandfather of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So now you can see we're getting close to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So we have Qusay, his son is Hashim. Hashim was also the first one to start the journey that Quraysh used to make, one in the summer and one in the winter, that Allah mentions in Surah Quraysh. بإيلاف قريش إيلافهم رحلة الشتاء والصيف. So in the summer they will travel to Syria for trade, and in the winter they will travel south to Yemen. And so he was the one who started this. Now Hashim eventually he goes on to get married, but not from Mecca. He travels to Yathrib, which later on becomes known as Medina. He travels to Yathrib, and that is where he gets married. So he gets married, and he leaves behind his wife and continues his journey north to Syria. So basically, he leaves Mecca, travels north to Yathrib, gets married there, leaves his wife, and continues his travel north to Syria for business. However, he eventually passes away on his journey. And so he dies in Gaza, and that's where he gets buried. But he ends up leaving behind a pregnant wife in Yathrib. Eventually, she delivers a baby. And this baby, she names him Shaykh. Now, in the Arabic language, Shaykh means an old man. Why does she name a child old man? It's because at the time of his birth, he has some gray hair. So, she ends up calling him, giving him the name of Shaykh. So Shaykh is the son of Hashim. So eventually Shaykh he grows up in Medina, in Yathrib, with his mother and his relatives from the side of his mother. One day, a man comes into Yathrib from Mecca, from Quraysh, by the name of Al-Muttalib. By the name of Al-Muttalib. And he is the brother of Hashim. He is the brother of Hashim. So he is the uncle of this boy. He is the uncle of this boy, Shaykh. Why does he come? He comes to claim his nephew. He comes to claim his nephew, and so he tells them, I need to take him back to Mecca. And so initially they refused. But then he convinced them, he said, look, he comes from a noble family, and he needs to go back to learn his heritage and his culture, and to start to assume his responsibilities. Because the responsibilities are divided among the sons of Qusay. Hashim, and now you have this boy by the name of Shaybah. So eventually they agree to let him go. And so Al-Muttalib, he enters Mecca with this child, Shaybah, that no one had ever seen before. And in those days, slavery was common. You would go to the market and buy a slave. And slaves were usually young boys because you would buy them and then you would train them to work as slaves. So he enters Mecca with this boy that no one had ever seen before from the people of Mecca. And so they assume that this must be the slave of Al-Muttalib. He just bought him. So they end up referring to him as his child. They end up referring to him as Abdur-Rahman. They end up referring to the child as Abdur-Muttalib, the slave of Al-Muttalib. And so, who was Abdur-Muttalib? He was who? The grandfather. The grandfather of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so his real name was Shaykh. Now, we have some important uh, events to mention from the life of Abdul Muttalib. And so there are a few stories that we're going to mention, and these are important key events that took place that we should cover, inshallah. The first incident was the digging up of the well of Zamzam. Now remember that the well of Zamzam had disappeared. It had disappeared for 300 plus years. Because Jurhum, before they left, they sacked the well and they dumped it and they got rid of any trace that there is a well here. But Quraysh, they're familiar. They know that there is some well because the tradition has gone. And they know that there was a well that was, they know the story of Ismail and what happened and how a well was here once upon a time. And so Abdul Muttalib, he sees a dream in the morning. And so someone comes to him and says, "Give Tayyib." So Abdul Muttalib, in his dream, he responds, he says, "What is Tayyib?" And so he doesn't hear a response. And that was the end of the dream. So the following night, he hears a similar voice in the dream. And now he is being told, "Big and precious." He says, What is precious?" He doesn't hear anything back. And the dream comes. The third night, a voice calls out to him and says to him, "Big Zamzam." He responds, what is Zamzam?" And so the voice responds, "Zamzam, it will never fail, it will never dry up. It will water the grand pilgrims, and it lies between the dung and the blood, next to the nest of a crow with the white leg, and the ant's nest." So Abdul Muttalib, he wakes up in the morning and he's confused. He is unable to decode any of these symbols. And so he goes to the Kaaba in the morning and all of a sudden he notices certain things. He sees dung and blood from a camel that was slaughtered the night before. And, it was just left there. The intestines were just left there. So he notices dung and blood. And then he sees a crow with a white leg in the same area. And then he also notices a hollow wheel ants. So now the pieces of the puzzle are together. These symbols that he saw in his dream that were mentioned to him, he's seeing them. So Abdur-Rahman he said to himself, this is where the well of Zamzam is. And so he calls his son Harith, and they start digging. He calls his son Harith, and they start digging. Now, the well of Zamzam is not too far from the camp, only a few meters away. And so the people, they start to notice and they ask, what are you doing? What are you digging next to the traveler? What are you looking for? And so without answering them, the two of them, the father and the son, they continue digging. And so they protest, but Abdul-Muttalib and his son, they don't listen. And then eventually they leave them. The rest of the members of Quraysh, they leave them. The two of them are digging until finally Abdul-Muttalib finds out and praises Allah. And so the people, they come rushing to their place and they find that Abdul-Muttalib had covered the well of Zamzam. And so all of the leaders of Quraysh came and said, yes, we know what this is. This was the well of our grandfather Ismail. And we are all the descendants of Ismail. And so we all have a right to this well. So Abdul Muttalib said, no, it was me, I was the one who saw the dream, and I was the one who uncovered it. And so it belongs to me and me alone. And so they refused, saying that, they're all the descendants of Ismail, so it belongs to all of them. But Abdul Muttalib refused. And so they went back and forth. They got into a dispute, and they didn't know how to resolve their dispute. So someone suggested, let us resolve our dispute by going to a certain sorcerer, a certain witch, who used to basically, resolve disputes. And so she was a witch who used to be in contact with the jinn. And they said, let us go. So it turned out that she had traveled to Syria. So they said, okay, let's travel. And so they traveled. And on the way, they ran out of water. And so in the middle of the desert, Abdul Muttalib tells them that, look, if we are all going to die here, then we might as well dig our own graves. So whenever one of us dies, the rest of us can cover him and bury him instead of all of us dying, without getting buried. So they all dug their graves and they were waiting inside of their graves, waiting for him. So then Abdul Muttalib, he said, no, this is not right. For men like us to wait for death, let us go and search for water. And so they agreed, and they went in different directions to search for water. After a short while, Abdul Muttalib, he finds water. And he comes to them, and he says, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has saved you in this desert and provided for you water, and Allah showed me the dream to uncover Zamzam, then surely this must be an invitation. This must be. And so they all said to him that this is a sign that Zamzam belongs to you. And so they said, we give up our faith and let us go back. So they go back. Now, when the whole incident happened and they pressured Abdul Muttalib to share the well of Zamzam, Abdul Muttalib felt weak because he only had one son to defend him. And so in tribal societies, your strength is usually based on how many men you have. And so you could count on your sons the most. And so Abdul Muttalib, he makes a promise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he comes back to Mecca, he makes a vow. And so he says, "Oh Allah, if you grant me 10 sons, then I will sacrifice one of them for your sake." And so that is exactly what ends up happening. Allah blesses Abdul Muttalib with 10 sons and 6 daughters. So now it's time for him to fulfill his vow and sacrifice. He said, "I will sacrifice for you, O Allah, if you give me 10 sons." So what they used to do, Quraysh and the Arabs, they would go to their idol and they would have these arrows that they thought were divine. And so they would cast arrows in the direction of their idol. And for Quraysh, it was their idol Buddha. And so what was the sacrifice supposed to be? He was supposed to sacrifice his son. He was supposed to sacrifice his 10th son, which was Abdullah. So Abdullah, the son of Abdul Muttalib, was supposed to be sacrificed. So basically, Abdul Muttalib, he goes to, cast these arrows. So basically, these arrows, he lines up his sons, his 10 sons, and he casts the arrow, and he throws it. Basically, every time he throws it, it points to who? It points to Abdullah, the son of Abdullah. And he does it several times. And so, after doing it so many times, it's clear that I have to sacrifice this son and no other son. And so, he goes to the Kaaba and gets ready to sacrifice his son Abdullah. And so, one of the elder sons of Abdul Muttalib, he comes to his father, and he was who? Abu Talib. Abu Talib comes to his father Abdul Muttalib and says, "Look, we cannot allow you to kill your son." And so other people joined and said, "We're not going to let you do this. Because if you do this, then it will become a sunnah." That's what the Arabs will end up doing every time they have 10 sons. They will sacrifice one of their sons. And so it will become a trend after you. So Abdul Muttalib said, "This was the pledge that I made to Allah. I cannot give it up." And so this now ended up in another dispute. So once again, they decided to go to the witch. So they went to her, and this time she says, "Okay, let me get back to you. I'm going to go and consult my jinn, the spirits." And so the next day they came back, and she had an answer for Abdul Muttalib. And so she asked them, what is the retribution, the blood money that a person pays when someone is killed, someone is murdered? What is the penalty? What is the blood money? And so they said, it is 10 camels. So she said, put 10 camels on one side and put their son Abdullah on the other, and then cast arrows. If the arrow points towards the camels, then slaughter the camels. But if it points towards Abdullah, then add another 10 camels. And so they agreed, and they went back, and they did exactly as the witch told them. And so the arrow ended up pointing towards Abdullah. And so they added 10 more camels. They cast the arrow again, it pointed again to Abdullah. And they kept on doing this until they had now 100 camels. And now, finally, after we have 100 camels, he draws the arrows again. He draws the arrow, and finally now it points towards the camels. And so the people, they said, finally, you release your son now. Abdul Muttalib said, you do it again. And so he did it again, and again, and again, and he kept on way towards the camels. So they finally ended up slaughtering, sacrificing to 100 camels. And who paid for it all? Abdul Muttalib paid for it all. And he was known to be a very generous man. And so there was so much meat left that, even after the people took all the meat, there was still so much that was left that it fed the birds and the beasts and whatnot. And so that's why later on it became known among the Arabs that Abdul Muttalib is the one who fed humans as well as the animals. And the people, they were right when they said to Abdul Muttalib, don't do it. Do not sacrifice yourself because it will become a trend. The people will follow. And so when he sacrificed 100 camels, the blood money now changed from 10 to 100. And so the Arabs followed this new tradition. And, in fact, this was a tradition that continued even after Islam came. And so in Islam, until today, for someone who kills someone, the blood money is 100 camels, or in terms of currency nowadays, which is around 140 or 150,000 dollars. So later on, the parents of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who are basically Abdullah and Amina. Later on, Amina, she mentions to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that you are the son of the two who are about to get sacrificed. Who are they? Abdullah and the second, Ismail, who something similar happened to him, as you know. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exchanged him for the lamb that Ibrahim sacrificed. And so this is the story of Abdul Muttalib and how he discovered the well of Zamzam, and also the story of him about to sacrifice his son Abdullah, and how he eventually survived. And so in his survival was the birth of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So imagine Abdul Muttalib sacrificing, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not have been alive. And so all of these events were precursors to the arrival of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All of these events are being planned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the sequence, one. And so there is one more event that we would like to cover, inshallah ta'ala. As we mentioned, we have two important events in the life of Abdul Muttalib. The second event, we will, inshallah ta'ala, cover next week. We can do that. And so, with that, we come to the end of today's session. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك صلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
So he gotta go to his family doctor and then